This audio presentation of Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter and Lau Russell, a home study course, is brought to you by audioenlightenment.com, copyright 2015, all rights reserved. Prelude to Intimate Home Study Course of Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy. These lessons are for the purpose of revealing the nature of God and verifying His presence as the one universal being, through the gradual unfolding of the secret process of creation which have until now been unknown to man. My ability to prove God as a scientific fact and bring Him within the range of man's comprehension through incontrovertible evidence of His controlling presence in all creating thing is the result of having experienced fully the rarest of all mental phenomena, known as the illumination, into the light of cosmic consciousness, during a 39-day and night period in May and June of 1921. I will not describe that phenomena here, for it will be fully described in the following pages, except to explain that the seat of sensation becomes completely severed from its centering conscious mind for intervals, followed by intervals of partial awareness of bodily sensing. During these intervals of complete severance, one becomes holy mind, the one mind of God, in which is all knowledge, all power, and all presence. During all history since the dawn of consciousness in man, there have been recorded about 30 cases of partial illumination, but probably only 3 in all history have been fully illumined. Naturally, the entirety of the secrets of creation were mine to know as a complete and consistent cosmogony, who enabled me to envision this universe as a whole. Underlying all of it was a fundamental principle, which is so simple that I felt that I could gather the great scientists of the world together and give them the entire principle in a few minutes. For I had been aware that science has been searching for such an underlying principle which would apply to all phenomena for decades. This I prepared to do by purchasing a textbook of science, Duncan's New Knowledge, to familiarize myself with the present state of scientific knowledge, for before my illumination I knew nothing whatsoever of science. To my amazement, I found that the entire cosmogenetic theory of science was so unlike God in nature that while reading it, I felt that these laws, hypotheses, and other conclusions could not possibly have been written by men of our day, for they were so far afield from fact that they seemed more like the conjuring of an Arthurian sage who told of the first flat earth, upheld at its 4 corners by huge elephants, as their cosmogenetic concept. As I read these unnatural theories and laws, it gradually dawned upon me that these primal ideas were so fixed within the mental structure of science that it would be more than foolhardy to attempt to carry out my plan. The science I read was so utterly complex that it was beyond the average comprehension, whereas the science of God's plan in nature, which I wished to give, was so simple that anyone in average intelligence could master it without difficulty. I also realized that I was unaware of the language in which to speak to science, as I was of the Chinese tongue, and its terminology must be mastered also before I could approach the subject. This seemed strange to me, for I felt that no special terminology was even needed to tell that simple story of the cause of all effect. Knowing that I would but invite ridicule if I attempted to impart my knowledge prematurely, I began an intensive preparation to so effectually present God's simple principle, which is forever repeated in every phenomena of notion, that there could be no possible legs left for the old and inconsistent cosmogony to stand on. To do this, it became necessary to so build the new on the old one need not be attacked to tear it down, but merely paint the picture of what is right over the old picture of what is wrong so effectually that the old one can never again be seen. During this long period, I have made some progress by gradually infiltrating some new ideas about the elements of matter during my 7 years of the presidency of the Society of Arts and Sciences, such as my work on hydrogen, which led to the discovery of its isotopes in heavy water, and by charting the 2 atomic bomb elements, which I then copyrighted under the names of uridium and urium. 20 years later, they were isolated and renamed plutonium and neptunium, without giving due credit to me for having first given knowledge of their existence to the world by mailing my new periodic charts containing these 2 elements to 1,000 foremost scientists. This and many other discoveries were given by me to the world without credit, but that did not matter. Truth eventually forces recognition, and I could afford to be wise and wait until I had worthily prepared for the day when the light could so fully be focused upon the truth that its recognition could not be evaded. The fundamental cosmogony of science which so amazed me might be termed a transient discontinuous, unbalanced, one-way universe which had a beginning eons ago by the unexplained and unexplainable formation of a tremendous flaming mass of heat which is slowly radiating away by splitting into smaller masses which expand within themselves and from each other until they eventually end in heat death. Out of this unnatural theory came the first and second laws of thermodynamics, which have no validity whatsoever. For the premise that heat is energy, upon which they are founded, has no validity. The resultant one-way universe allowed for no compensating generation to counterbalance its radiation, despite the accepted law of equal and opposite action and reaction. Energy cannot run uphill, science said. It can only run downhill. It so happens in God's plan that energy neither runs up nor downhill. God's universal body is a two-way, compensating, continuous, and eternal universe of absolute balance in every effect of motion. Generation equals radiation. Compression equals expansion. The red half of the spectrum equals the blue half. Solid matter balances the potential of its surrounding space in every wave field. And each one of every opposite pair not only balances with its opposite, but borns its opposite through sequential interchange. God's universe is entirely composed of microcosmic and macrocosmic masses of pulsating electric waves, which we call matter. These pulsing waves constitute the universal heartbeat, or universal breath of God's body. God's body continues its manifestation of the life principle by breathing outward and inward sequentially, just as you breathe out and in balanced sequence to continue your appearance of existence. Every mass in the universe breathes out and in rhythmically. There are no exceptions to this law which every nebula, sun, planet, or electron of an atom obeys, but in varying frequencies, approximate to their potential. Your breath frequency may be 10 cycles per minute, while the sun's frequency is 1 cycle in 11 years. The most obvious fact of nature is its repetition, in reverse of every effect of motion in two-way pulsing cycles. It is unaccountably strange that science has never observed this most obvious of all of nature's characteristics. Every cycle in nature is a two-way equal interchange between pair of opposite conditions. That interchange between the equally balanced anodes and cathodes of this electric wave universe constitutes its pulsating heartbeat, which likewise is cyclic, otherwise it could not continue. This electric wave universe of divided pressure is an electric record of God's thinking. It is the creation of an ever-living and eternal Creator. If creation is condemned to death, then by the same token, so is its Creator. God's universe of electric wave matter has no beginning or ending in time, for time itself is voided by itself. It has no existence except to the limited sense of man, who sees but its forward flow and not its compensating, voiding, backward flow. Time is but a part of this great illusion of nature, this cosmic light mirage which forever stimulates the idea of God's knowing through two-way, balanced, self-voiding motion, which but produces an unreal universe of seeming. If time has no other than a sensed existence, it can have no beginning or ending. The purpose of these lessons is twofold. First and paramount is to prepare the layman who desires personal power and progress through achievement in personal creative expression to attain that end by full understanding of the cause of all the effects he produces, in order that he may command those effects to his obedience. With cosmic knowledge as a foundation upon which he can firmly stand to face every problem of his daily life, whether social, domestic, business, health, family, friendships, professional, or otherwise, he can meet them with a clarity of vision and conquer them with intelligent action and decision instead of complexing his problems because of his inability to fully comprehend their cause. The secondary purpose is to so thoroughly define and explain this universal illusion, which seems so real to the sense of man, and prove to the satisfaction of the most exacting scientist that the entire electric wave universe is but a cosmic cinema picturing a cosmic idea of cause and effect with cosmic projection cameras called wave fields of light. These imaginary cosmic projection cameras of light wave fields are as describable and definable mechanically as the projection machines of their earthly counterparts are describable and definable. The cosmic cinema is a glorious manifestation of the imaginary thought process of God's mind, but the projected light image of God's imagining, which seems to move and have life of being in them, are but electrically sensed thought forms of thought imaginings, which but constitute a mirage of that reality which it is but simulates. This fact will be gradually clarified as these chapters unfold. Also God's reason for limiting the senses of man in order that he should believe the simulation to be a reality. This solution of the seemingly unfathomable mystery of the Creator and creation fulfills a prophecy made by Sir Oliver Lodge, who said, in effect, that if in the coming centuries the great cosmic secret was ever revealed to man, its discovery would not come from the trained scientific mind, but would be the supreme vision of some poet, painter, philosopher, or saint, who could see the universe as a whole. It is my hope that each reader will so clearly comprehend each part of this whole picture of God's cosmic plan, that each one can so put them together in his comprehension, that he too may vision the many parts as one whole. He who can so strongly see the oneness of all that seeming many parts of God's plan may make of his own life a divine extension of that one, and thus become master creator of his own creating universe. Walter Russell, end of prelude. Universal Law, A Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell. Lesson number 1. Meditation Scientifically Explained. Meditation is the most important of all the functions of human life with further human progress. So little is known of it, even by the greatest of the world's geniuses who constantly practice it knowingly, but could not explain it, that it now seems necessary to so carefully define and explain that divine function that everyone can knowingly practice it, and thus knowingly command his achievements to be masterful, or command his body to be perfect, or his life to be full to overflowing. For through meditation, every man can become whatever he wishes to become. Meditation is communing with God for the purpose of working knowingly with God. Working knowingly with God. You all know that it is the way I work, and because of it I have been enabled to do 10 times the amount of work I otherwise would have done, and all of it in a masterly manner. When I know that God's thinking and mine are one, and that I am so consciously aware of his presence at every working moment, likewise consciously feeling my hands to be his hands, my work could not be other than masterly. To constantly work knowingly with God, never ceasing, is to be constantly inspired with the ecstasy of his nature. I have felt that way since I was a child. I felt his presence with me at the piano. The musical rhythms which flowed from my soul were interpretations of his rhythmic thinking as it became my thinking. God was my teacher. I needed no other. He was always with me in my soul and lifted me to great heights even in my early days. All during my life I have walked and talked and worked knowingly with God. Every year in May he took me up into a high mountain for a few days alone with him in his light to illumine my path for the years ahead, which he had planned for me and with me. For I had always dimly known the years ahead for me, which were so amazingly clarified in 1921, when the message of the divine Iliad was interpreted for the dawning age of cosmic man. Knowing that I must demonstrate by my own life that which I must teach to other men by one desires through life has been to live life worthily, to manifest the power in me which God gives to every man for the asking, and to immunize myself from all that is unloving in order that I could forever create with him that beauty of balanced rhythmic thinking which is his universe. And so it is that the time has come now for me to teach you who desire to unfold your own omniscience, how to find that zero of stillness in his light which will illumine your way to your own mountaintop. The first step. To meditate with God, first forget your body and stop thinking about anything. Decentrate to the zero of stillness. Become a vacuum insofar as your senses are concerned. Desire the light. If you could express it in words, let that expression have a meaning, but without words. Let it be more like a realization, as though you said in words, "The glory of thy anointing light is upon me. I am in the Spirit. Thy light is all about me. It encompasses me. It shines through me. I am dissolved in thy light. Thy light is my light. I am immersed in my light. I am in thy light, knowing thy light. Be thou me, that I may not be myself alone." Meditation defined. Meditation is a desire of man to know God in him, and to manifest his God awareness by extending his knowing through his thinking to the production of material bodies created by him in the image of his inspired conceiving. I might put it more simply by saying that meditation is a desire to be alone with God, to talk with him. Meditation is really a conference between your soul and the universal soul. To be one with God means to desire his knowledge and power. God's mind is your mind. Hence you have all knowledge and power that God has to the extent of your awareness of God in you. If God's knowledge is asleep in you, it must be awakened in order that you may be aware of it. When you are aware of it, you can use it, for the entirety of universal law works with and for you at your command. To the extent of your awareness, and to the extent only, you may use universal power to think your knowing into material forms. Your knowing is your mind self. Your mind self is you, the eternal being. Your self is not your body, nor is your knowing in your brain, but it controls your body and your brain as its absolute matter. Do not confuse your mind and brain as one. Your mind thinks through your brain, and with it, as a lever works upon its fulcrum. For your brain is but the instrument for fulfilling the commands extended to it by consciousness, which mind is. Your brain records memories, experiences, and information electrically, just as phonographs likewise do. But it is the will of your mind which orders your brain to obey, just as it likewise orders your automobile to obey. The measure of your cosmic knowing is the measure of your self and God awareness. It is the measure of your ability to dwell in the light of all knowing and to command the thought universe of creation with God as co-creator with God. Thinking what you know into imagined form is expressing your eternal self in the invisible universe of mind. Giving formed bodies to imagined thought forms by following up your thoughts with actions is expressing your eternal self in the visible universe of matter. That is all that God does, for he controls his electric body as its absolute master. He keeps all of its interactions and interchanging in absolute balance, for God is eternally creating his body in the image of his desiring. You can do likewise if you desire to, only by working knowingly with God. You can be master of your body in the measure of your awareness of God in you, and keep it in balance instead of continually unbalancing it in diverse ways from morning until night, and from night until morn, wearing it out with tension and strain, fear and worrying, and various emotions which destroy your body with toxic poisoning. Whatever you know you think, and what you think you become. Creating bodies. This brings us to a point where much confusion exists regarding mind and matter. We must make this relationship so clear that the confusion will dissolve in your understanding. Mind is spiritual and constitutes the invisible universe of cause. Matter is physical and constitutes the visible universe of effect. God's mind has but one idea. That idea is creation as a whole. God has but one desire. That desire is to give creative expression to his one whole idea. God expresses his desire electrically by thinking and imagining. God is the universal soul. God's thinking and imagining creates a body to manifest his soul. That body is the electric wave universe as a whole. It is God's one idea divided by his thinking and imagining into countless million units of ideas, each having a differently formed body, but all manifesting the one by being extensions of each other. There is naught else in all of this vast universe but moving bodies extending from the stillness of the cosmic light of soul, which centers thinking mind of God and man. All formed bodies are made in the image of God and man, and extended from mind imagining to manifest God and man. How simple it really is when you think of it that way. Creator and creation being just mind, imagined forms electrically extended into electrically formed bodies fashioned in the image of their imaginers. How much more simple is it to think of all the universe as one mind, one soul, and one body, seemingly divided into many minds, many souls, and many bodies. You must really learn to think of God and God's body the way before you can fully understand the oneness of all things. When you do learn to think of it that way, you will then know that there are not two separate or separable things in the universe. Likewise, you will fully understand that all things are extensions of each other and of the One. How glorious and wonderful is the realization that mind of man and mind of God can know their oneness in meditation, in order that the creations of man can have the balanced rhythm, the symmetry, and the stability of God's creation. All that God does is to think thought forms of ideas and give them formed bodies from his body and soul of his soul. God thinks man, and the body of man appears in the image of God's imagining. In the same manner, the bodies of roses and oaks of the trees and forest, ants and lizards, elephants and camels, planets, suns and oceans with their living hosts of swimming things, and countless other formed bodies appear as separate ideas, all extended from the One, and all from each other. All that is all that man does. He also thinks thought forms of ideas and gives them formed bodies from the universal body, and soul from the universal soul. The engineer conceives the image of a bridge, and the formed body of the bridge appears in the image of the engineer's imagining. Likewise, the musician thinks music in the silence of his imagining, and lo, the formed body of the music appears in sound extending from the silence. And so are you and all men thinking imagined forms of multiple things and giving them formed bodies in the image of their imagining. Awaken your own genius. There is nothing the greatest genius in the world can do that you cannot do. You have the same inheritance that he does. The only reason why you have not given evidence of it is because you have not yet become aware of it. In other words, you have not yet discovered yourself. The greatest miracle that can happen to you is that wonderful discovery of yourself, the divine power which lies within yourself, and the unlimited knowledge which you unknowingly have, which you could never acquire from books or universities in 1,000 years. One of the reasons you have not yet made the miraculous discovery is because meditation is still new to the human race, and is slowly being discovered by men, one by one, as each one begins to hear the inner voice of the Spirit, which is forever calling within the souls of all men. When you are too busy with material things to have time to listen to that voice, you become chained to emotions of your body and to the demands of material things. You are enslaved by them. The moment you begin to listen to your inner voice, that moment you become freed from slavery to body. The high heavens of God's omnipotent and omniscient universe then becomes your dwelling place. Meditation began when thinking began at the dawn of consciousness in the human race. That was but a few thousand years ago. Until that time, men were ruled by their senses and their instincts. As soon as humans began to think and know, they began to suspect a superior being. Worship then began. Sun worship, idol worship, and finally the inner voice of thinking man led him to the spiritual ideas of many gods, then to one God. Through the centuries of meditation or communion between the physical senses of man and their spiritual inspiration, the genius of some unfolded beyond others. This gradual unfolding has been taking place during several ages of man, until now a new stage of the human race is unfolding, which is the dawn of the cosmic age. The great masses of mankind are not yet ready for cosmic knowing, but many thousands are ready for this new knowledge of the invisible universe of thinking mind. It may be that there are even a few million who are ready to become the seed of the new race of cosmic man. The test for ascertaining the average number of those who are ready for this higher step upward in the unfolding of the man idea is not a religious one. It is a cultural one. In New York City, for example, about 7,000 people out of 8 million people love the higher inspirational rhythmic creations of the world's great geniuses who interpret the heartbeat of nature for the souls of men. These same few shun noisy crowds, shudder at jazz music which distresses them acutely, in order to seek aloneness in the forest of ocean shores, where they can hear nature's silent whispering and rhythmic sounds within their very soul. To the rest of the 8 million, the silent whisperings of nature have no meaning whatsoever other than boredom. If these be found at ocean shores, it will be where boardwalks and blatant noise vibrates the senses of their bodies pleasantly for the excitement of their senses. They still live sensed existence with body awareness controlling their lives. The dawn of consciousness has not yet illumined them with the light which still awaits their soul's awakening. The dawn of the cosmic age. Those illumined ones who are now ready to open the doors of their souls far wider for the light to further illumine them will uplift the whole human race to higher standards, and out of that whole there shall forever come an average few continually, until the cosmic age will be strong with growing numbers of the more and more illumined. Knowing, conceiving, thinking idea. Creation is an idea of God. It is one whole idea. That one whole idea constitutes what God knows. God thinks the one idea into countless parts of countless forms. Thus God's thinking takes God's knowing apart into seemingly separate ideas, each of which is given its separate form. That is exactly what you do. You may have all of God's knowing if you become fully illumined with it, but in each communion with God, you get a little more of it each time your soul touches the universal soul. You then take it apart and think it into objective form. You always get that which you ask for if you ask for it with your soul instead of your senses. If you ask for it in words alone, which are just words, you will not receive what you ask for, because you have not asked God for it. You have but asked your senses for it. When, however, you have actually written your desire into your heartbeat, as I have automatically done all my life from moment to moment, you unfailingly acquire the knowledge you ask for. It comes to you in a timeless flash in the language of light, which God uses to talk to you and me when we wish to talk with Him. Having thus acquired that part of the one whole idea which you have asked for in your heart, you then think it into the form of a concept by imagining it into a form. This conceptual form may be misty or nebulous at first. Do not act upon it while it is still nebulous. Decentrate to the zero of the light again, over and over again, then concentrate. Each time you concentrate, you more clearly see the image of it in your inspired imagining. So long as it is still in embryo, do not give it birth into the objective universe of form and motion. Dwell on it until it becomes as clear to your inner vision as the body you give it becomes clear to your outer vision. If it is an invention, meditate upon it until you clearly see it. Do not waste time experiencing it. See it completely mentally before you spend time on it physically, otherwise it will be immature. If it is a sale of something, assemble all of the elements of it together until you can vision it clearly before approaching your client. If it is a motif for a symphony, hear it completely in the sounds of your soul before you give it to body. No matter what your desire is, to take it to God for a spiritual form before you give it a physical one. Get into the fixed habit of seeking that zero of stillness in the light before starting to think or act. When you finally act to give your concept a physical form, keep your soul attuned to the universal soul. Hold fast to that ecstasy of inner joyousness which comes from working knowingly with God. Your creation will be finished in much less time, and you will know no fatigue. Talk to God constantly in His wordless, rhythmic language of light. The moment you find yourself working alone with your own ego, stop working, for the emotions of your sensed body are making you aware of it, and your work will not be enduring without the light of your soul in it. Physical emotions immediately smother spiritual inspiration. Taking idea apart. You know how an idea timelessly, all of it, but to think it into objective form is to take it apart for extension into the three-dimensional universe of time and space. To thus think it, you divide and multiply it into many conditioned material forms and set them in motion to become a part of this physical universe of multi-conditioned moving forms. This creative process requires a technique, but knowledge and inspiration requires no technique. Always remember that God is creating His universe by giving body forms to mind imagined forms. Likewise, you are creating your universe by giving objective body forms to your imagined forms. You must, however, conceive the idea for these forms before you begin to build them into your imagining. Then you must imagine them fully before borning them objectively. Then your imagined idea is sufficiently clear, then start creating it whether you know its technique or not. Learn the technique of it in the doing of it. Always remember that a technique is something that your body acquires, and that anyone can acquire any technique. But knowledge and inspiration you do not acquire. You already have that. All you need do is to awaken it. And to awaken it, all you need is desire to awaken it. The moment you have the desire, and technique know of it, you will then begin to know that glorious language of the light which you yourself are. Inspiration will then come to you, and in that inspiration your desire is being fulfilled with the knowing which that inspiration is. The language of light is wordless, but in it is the essence of meaning. You yourself can put it into words, for that is but a technique. Likewise, whatever form you wish to give it, you yourself can translate the essence of that divine language of light into form through any medium by acquiring technique. That is something which your body does by acting solely with your will. Through your will, you command your body to express your effort. Your body is but an automatic machine which must be manipulated by your will. It must be trained by your will to fulfill every technique of expression, and it may take years to train your body to automatically obey your will. That is why it takes years of practice for a body to become a perfect musical instrument, or an instrument with paints, writes, or sculpts, with tools which are but extensions of a body. Conception of idea is recorded as a seed of an idea. Your conception of an idea has the same relation to that idea as the seed of an oak has to the full-grown oak. Your imagining is recorded in your very soul, and from the stillness of your soul the idea extends into form as the form of the oak extends from the stillness of its formless seed. The inner joyousness of conceiving an idea and imagining its form and purpose is as uplifting as the created extension of it is, and it is purposeful, even if it but uplifts yourself. To be purposeful for the world you must give your inspired imagining a formed body which responds to the senses of man. It is through this action-reaction of giving it a material body that you make it a masterpiece by extending your soul into it by moment-to-moment communion with God to give love to your creation. If you do not extend love from your soul to your product, you do not give it life. Not having life or love given to it cannot re-give life of love to inspire others. It is already dead and soon will be buried in a trash basket of dead things. A masterpiece of any product whatsoever is that to which the life and love of the Creator soul has been extended to be reflected from soul to soul. The glory of the unseen and unheard. There is an indescribable glory all along the road which leads from your active thinking to the stillness of deep meditation. If you cannot actually go to the forest or sea, the better to commune with God, go there in your imagination. If some problem demands your thoughts, let the imagined tones of the sea drown them out. If you imagine the sea and hear the rhythm of its waves pounding upon the shores as echoes of the heartbeat of the universe resounding within you, or if you hear the breeze whispering in the pines with your inner ears, the glory of that ecstasy will soon drown out dross thoughts of the earth. Meditation transports you from the world of sensing the motion of things materially to imagining them cosmically. It transports you from the world of blatant sounds which sear the senses to the world of rhythmic silences which is without body, the world of the soul and the seed of things unborn which await their birth through you. It is your escape from emotion, with its tensions and nervous strains, to the ecstasy of your soul's high heaven. Earth music is melodic and chains you to the earth. The music of the spheres, which you hear with inner ears, is deeply tonal and not melodic. The rhythm and tones of nature's music, which sing its octaves in the language of light, have always within them the pulsing rhythms of the universal heartbeat. Always the 1-2, 1-2 pulsing of the father-mother heartbeat, of borning, reborning forms of things which manifest the father-mother pulsing rhythms of the soul's high heavens. Always in your deep meditation, the music of the silences from which sounds of earth spring is like unto the aftermath of the great symphonies by cosmic masters which have refolded from sounds of earth which your ears have heard, into your very soul which still hears them in the pulse beat of your imagining. Never will you hear the 1-2-3 of waltz rhythm in the soul's high heavens, for that syncopation brings you quickly back to earth and to awareness of your body emotions and its senses. That 1-2-3 rhythm makes you want to dance. To those whose desires are so deeply rooted to the sense of the earth that their deep appeal is from the complex syncopation of jazz, the silences of the high heavens are but a deep void, as though they were not. Even of such a one it may not be said that he is without soul. It may be said of him only that the light of his soul is dimmed or sleeping, and he himself can awaken it, if he but listens long enough, and often enough to the rhythms of the soul's high heavens, to awaken recognition of the light which is within all men. The story is told that Diamond Jim Brady thus awakened his sleeping inner self quite accidentally. He bought an automatic piano and many jazz and foxtrot records for his worldly friends, and ordered many classic records for his highbrow friends, of whom he had many. While playing these classic records, he recognized within him the glory of the universal heartbeat rhythm. It is said that he listened to those records alone for hours until he became completely transformed culturally. I am in no way suggesting to you that you should not listen to the music which excites bodily emotions, for they are good when properly divided between the rhythms of earth and the rhythm of heaven. We need to live gloriously on earth, as well as in the high heavens, but to live the rhythms of earth alone is to be but clay on earth, chained to earth, a slave of earth, never soaring into the high heavens of the light of your immortality. Mortality is a prison cell from which you can escape only upon the wings of your immortality. End of Lesson 1. Lesson number 2. Continuation of meditation scientifically explained, further considering technique. There is much confusion regarding the relation of an inspired idea to the technique of its expression. Thousands of times I have heard people say, "Well, I could never be an artist, for I could not even draw a straight line." For this reason, I would like to expand what I said in our first lesson regarding this relationship. I have told you that anyone can acquire a technique to give a material body to an idea, but so can an automatic machine or a tape recorder. A technique can be photographed or electrically repeated, and such a recording of a rendition by a master may even be immeasurably better than the technique of a human, for the automatic recorder may record much of the soul of the master's technique, while the human may have acquired a perfect technique with his senses, but be lacking in soul. Just as an inspired conception is the result of a conference between your soul and the universal soul to produce a thought body, so must your rendition into a material body continue that soul-to-soul conference. Every technical rendition of a painting, a symphony, or product of a factory which has been conceived by the soul of a master must also be rendered by the soul of the master. Every brushstroke or tone of symphony must conform to the nature of God reflected in the nature of the master. Love is the basis of the Spirit, and the law of love is the basis of creation. The nature of God is to give out his love for regiving. The nature of the master must be to give out love to inspire others to regive love. It has often been my good fortune to hear such masters as Perdusky or Gabrilich practice scales and finger exercises. The unthinking listener might marvel at such skill, while one who listens with inner ears hears the silence of the soul even in one's practicing. The soul alone can give out love. The body can render a perfect technical reproduction, but if the love nature of God is not in it, it is not art. For the art of anything is not in the skill of rendering a visible or audible thing, but in the beauty and love which only the stillness of the light of your soul can give to it. And therein lies the difference between the genius of a master and skulless mediocrity. That is why your constant communion with God is necessary for every moment of life and every stage of your creation. God must sit with you on your piano stool or workbench. Your hands must be his hands. Your thinking must be his thinking. Love must be interwoven in every stitch of whatever pattern you are weaving, every word you are writing, and every interchange between yourself and your fellow man. And as love is rhythmically repeated in its giving and regiving to synchronize with the giving of your outward breath to the heavens and their regiving to you, and as such balanced rhythmic interchange between your heartbeat pulsing and all other electric extensions from the stillness of your soul is law, the basic fundamental law of all creating things in all this electric universe. Your own masterpiece is the measure of how divinely you have conceived it, and how worthily you have rendered it in balance with universal law. To the extent that you can extend the beauty of your imagined rhythms to material bodies built in the images of your spiritual conception, those rhythms which you create are masterpieces of great art. The very measure of the quality of your material interpretation lies in your ability to translate imagined forms and rhythm of the universal heartbeat into bodily forms and rhythms, which can re-inspire others with the ecstasy of your inspiration. When you inspire others, you are manifesting the nature of God and the fulfillment of His law by giving love. Those who you re-inspire are likewise manifesting the nature of God and fulfilling His law by re-giving love. You cannot re-inspire others, however, if you leave God out of your technical rendition. That is why meditation is necessarily continuous. That is why great masters never go into their concert hall or into their easels or workbenches without an interval of time to forget materially to seek the zero of the still light, which centers their consciousness before extending their thought images out from that stillness into the three-dimensional universe of moving electric waves which creation is. Not only every day should be started by seeking that zero of stillness, but every moment from the beginning of anything to its fulfillment. How often have I literally opened the door of my studio after some disturbing telephone call or other distraction to let my sensed self out and let God in? You cannot do anything of yourself alone. Whether you know it or not, you have to acquire God power to even lift your finger. You are automatically controlled in every action. Why not be controlled by working with God knowingly at all times and being fully aware that God and His law are working with you? Continuous meditation means continuous God awareness, and that continuity of awareness is forever leading you higher and higher into the high heavens of your own mountaintop. That and that alone is the great glory of life and of living. That awareness and that alone leads you to masterfulness of achievement, peace, prosperity, happiness, and the love of all mankind, which is forever enduring. The very essence of meditation, the basic reason for meditation, is that you want to ask something from God. There is no other reason for it, and you do not begin to ask God for anything until you begin to realize your oneness with God. You then ask God because you realize that you cannot fulfill your soul's desire without Him. When you finally do ask Him, you naturally ask how you may fulfill your soul's desire. O God, show me the way. Illumine my path with Thy light, you say, wordlessly in your heart. This your soul asks in the silence of the universal soul. Naturally, your inner ears cannot hear the answer except in the silence of the light of inspiration. Naturally also, you cannot comprehend the wordless answer from the silence of rest in His light unless your soul is so attuned to the universal soul that your inner ears can hear that answer in the universal language of light. That is the language in which God talks to inspired man who knows God in him and is thus illumined. Naturally, you seek aloneness with God in the quiet of your chamber or workshop, or in the forest of nature where the nature of God is being made manifest in the forms and whisperings of rhythms which echo within your own heartbeat as one. That very desire puts you in the mood for meditation, and the more you thus become companion with God, the more readily you comprehend His language of light and can put words and forms to it. When you have formed the habit of constant communion with God, you will not have to make any conscious effort or seek the quiet of nature's environment to induce it. It will become a working habit, a fixed habit of working knowingly with God under any circumstance. I can as immediately decentrate to the zero of the light of all knowing in a subway if I so desire as in a forest. Let us analyze what is meant by soul's desire. What is the greatest thing in the world which you can ask for or become? Well, there's only one answer, and that is to be like unto God and manifest His nature. In its simplest form, just what exactly does that mean? In its simplest form, how can we be like God and manifest His nature? The simplest answer to that is to say that God is love, life, and truth, which lies in the light of all knowledge and power. That is what God is. That is the nature of God, the universal mind or soul. Now, as to what God does, the answer can be just as simple. God extends His knowledge and power from the still light of His mind. through the pulsations of his thinking, to waves of moving, divided light, to create one pulsing body, to manifest the love, life, and truth of his knowing, which constitutes his nature. And that is exactly what you do to the extent of your knowledge and ability. You extend your knowledge and your power from the still light of your mind, through the pulsation of your thinking, to create your universe in forms which reflect your nature. Whatever you create is the image of you. You call it your individuality or personality. Whatever it is your image projected into forms imagined by you to manifest your nature. You create a manifestation of your own self by thinking your knowing into form. If you know but little and think but little, you will create yourself into a little person. If you think out of balance, you will create an unbalanced individual with an unbalanced body. If you are a hypochondriac, you have made yourself into one instead of a genial, cheerful, happy, and healthy leader of men. Whatever you wish to become, you may become. If you create your own personality alone, by yourself, it will have all of the weakness of the senses. The more you ask God to help you make yourself into His image, the more power of His mind you will have to fashion yourself into a powerful individual. When His nature and yours are one, you will then be a man of cosmic power, and your creations will manifest your nature and God's nature as one. Our very name for God's creation is nature, for that is what nature is. I shall define nature for you in simple words. Nature is an electric wave thought image of God's nature, electrically projected from His formless and unconditioned one light into countless many forms of conditioned light, which we call matter. How your meditation affects others. Your genius does not depend upon your ability to translate your soul-imagined patterns into material ones, for your genius unfolds for your own uplift, even if you never express it through a technique which gives it a body. To awaken it in your soul uplifts you to your own high heavens, but does not uplift your neighbor to his until you have expressed it as a soul-to-soul message by giving it a foreign body. When the genius of your soul sends out a visual or audible message which awakens the genius in another soul and re-inspires him with your inspiration, you have then extended your immortality to another, and that other one recognizes his own genius to the measure of your awakening of the knowledge of his immortality in him. That is what is meant by the following quotation from Salutation to the Day in the message of the Divine Iliad. I am the light of universal thinking. I translate the language of light into the words of man for those who know not their universality. Immortality is mine. I will earn immortality. I will bestow immortality. Mine is the power to give immortality. I shall not deny that which will give immortality to those who dwell in the darkness and who reach out for the light. I will reach out my hand and lead him who asketh into the light. It is not necessary to another whom you may inspire that he should have the technical mastery of an instrument or medium you employ to lift him up into your ecstatic heaven for the moment. You inspire him with your genius. He has it in himself to the extent of the intensity of his inspiration. He cannot bring his heavenly inspiration to earth as you can unless he acquires a technique that you have acquired to be enabled to bring them to earth. It has, however, uplifted his cultural standard, and so doing has uplifted the cultural standard of all mankind, even as one drop of water uplifts the whole ocean by that measure. Your transcendent genius is the result of your communion with God. By your masterly interpretation of the rhythmic heartbeat of his thinking, you have caused others to commune with you and God. Your meditation and theirs are one. You have made them to forget their sensed bodies and dwell in the mind kingdom of your high heavens with you and all illumined souls who dwell in God's kingdom of light. That is the way that cultural gradually awakens an unfolding man. Those who have come to know the kingdom through meditation tell it to others in the inspired language of light, and that language has no word, no sound, no form, and no technique. The language of light is from light to light, or soul to soul, and there need be no word, no sound, no form. The soul understands that universal language whenever expressed by the soul. The The body's senses, centered at the seat of sensation, centered in the brain, can never understand it, even though it hears its expression in words and sounds and sees it expressed in form. Meditation again defined. The seat of consciousness, which is the light in man, centers the seat of sensation, from which the electric action-reaction sequence of thinking extend. In meditation, you are partially or wholly severing the extending sensations of your thinking in order to find the stillness of the light within your consciousness. You thus lose your manifestation of life, which your body is, to find the eternal life, which the soul of you is. Let us again define meditation in another word. Meditation is a communion with God for the purpose of acquiring knowledge and power to manifest God as co-creator of His universe. In other words, it is to enable the mind to control matter. To the extent that you acquire knowledge, do you acquire the power to control matter. That acquisition gives you the power to create your own individual universe in your own image of your individual self, as God likewise creates His universe in His own image. Through meditation, you alone free your body from slavery and acquire a mastery over it. The human race has been a slave to its body all down the ages. You and every other man are slaves to your bodily senses until knowledge gives your mind mastery over them. As different words about the same thing have connotations which lead to better understanding, let us again define meditation with different words. Meditation is an intercommunication between your immortal mind and the electric senses of your mortal body. Meditation is a conference between your immortal mind self who knows, your thinking which builds images of your knowing, and your body which acts in obedience to the will of your mind. Meditation is an expression of desire for knowledge of perfect cause for the purpose of producing perfect effect. In communion with God, you acquire God awareness, which means cosmic consciousness, by forgetting body awareness, which means material sensing. God awareness in you brings realization of the light of cosmic consciousness in you. When your realization of your cosmic unity with God is strong enough, your cosmic power is the measure of your intensity of that realization. The only way you can multiply your strength to think or to create or to command matter to your obedience, such as commanding your body to health or commanding masterly achievement by control of your body, is to multiply God awareness in you. Your mind is God's mind. Your thinking is God's thinking. Your creative processes are God's creative processes. When God concentrates His thinking, body form appears in the image of His desiring. When God decentrates His thinking, those body forms expand into disappearance to reappear when God reconcentrates His thinking. You do likewise, for there is but one knower, one thinker, and one creator in the universe. God is all that is. You are all that is. In meditative communion with God, you become aware of that. To be alone with God is to know the ecstasy of that awareness. God creates His universal body by extending the electric pulsations of His thinking from the stillness of the light of His knowing. Idea of God's knowing is electrically projected through the motion of His thinking to mirrored image waveforms of light, which we call matter. All matter is but electric wave pulsations of His thinking, recording the idea of His thinking in forms which appear, disappear, and reappear, to synchronize with the cyclical sequence of His concentrative, decentrative, and reconcentrative thinking, which characterize the entirety of effect in this electric universe of His creating. God's eternally creating universe is the result of His eternally continuous meditation. You create your universe in the same manner and by the same process and method under the control of the same law. There is no other manner, no process, no method, no law. Your universe of what you are is your mind idea, your soul's desire manifested unto the material image of your thinking. It is the result of your meditation. The most wonderful thing about it is that God will give you whatever you ask. Fulfill your desire, no matter what you desire. You can make yourself into a kind of a person you desire to be, whether bishop, poet, or thief, for the whole universe will work with you to fulfill your desire if you work with its law. If you work against the law, it will avail you nothing, even if you fulfill your desire. Balance your desires, therefore, and their fulfillment will likewise be balanced. Communion with God in meditation will not only mold your desires in harmony with divine law, but will give you knowledge of the nature of God, which will become your nature. To the extent that you reflect God's nature, your desires will also reflect God's nature. End of lesson.